Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. It is the return of the ICBA cast here on the ICBA Facebook network and in iTunes Store, wherever fine podcasts are sold for free. I'm Jordan Bateman, the Communications Director of the ICBA, joined as always by
Chris Gardner, President of ICBA. It is great to be back. It's been a while.
Believe it? I can't believe it. Now, Chris, you're just back from California. Tell us about your time at the San Francisco Giants game and Stanford University football.
College football is great, very exciting. Home opener for Stanford. It's cold in San Francisco. That's all I can say. Great city, but you need a jacket.
You need a jacket. There you go. Tourism San Francisco on the line. They disagree. They say you can travel anytime you want, and it'll be nice and warm. Well, Chris, frankly, you and I needed some time off in this past couple of weeks. I went to the family and I went to Whistler and to Peachland, Penticton Clone area. Because this has frankly been a summer of hell for the BC economy, all brought on by stupid government policies.
It was a busy summer. The lazy and dog days of August certainly weren't ones that we saw here at ICBA. And a lot of developments, and a lot of them are very negative in terms of the long-term implications that they're going to have for British Columbia and for our long-term prosperity. So we're very concerned on a number of fronts. So where do you want to start off?
Well, let's start with one of the most significant national importance, Trans Mountain Pipeline. After going 17 for 17 in court cases upholding the pipeline, the well-funded opponents of the pipeline got a little bit lucky. They brought forward 20 new complaints in a omnibus case before the Federal Court of Appeal. The court dismissed 18 of them, but upheld 2, which is basically, well, it's forced layoffs, it's forced the stall of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, sent back for more First Nations consultation. Grappling is the word that the judge used. Not sure how you legally define grappling. And also impact on the orcas in the Salish Sea. So, Chris, frankly, devastating news for the workers who are hoping for 4 to 6 years of solid work on this project. Devastating for the families who are already relying on that project, and very upsetting and concerning for those of us who worry about attracting more investment to Canada.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head. For those who, for the workers who were planning to mobilize, some of them, hundreds, were being mobilized. This is a devastating blow. And for the contractors that had signed contracts and were starting to get ready to do that work, this is it's the entire process around Trans Mountain has been very frustrating. Second, very negative news for Canada's energy and sector and the oil and gas sector. It really sends a signal that we can't get major projects approved and built in Canada. And we've seen investors understanding that and leaving Canada en masse. There's been $40 billion of asset sales of major international energy companies leaving Canada, selling their assets, and hollowing out in a large way the energy sector in Alberta, which is really becoming more or less a Canadian play, much less international investors' interest in Alberta for obvious reasons. I think the third message here is that governments at all levels in Canada haven't been able to get their act together. They haven't been able to basically set up a process, or an environmental review process, a regulatory review process that is consistent, that provides some certainty in terms of the process, not of outcome, but of the process, so that everybody understands what the rules are. You've got provinces fighting with the feds fighting with the provinces, local governments doing their thing,
overstepping their boundaries.
And then we've got the challenges around ensuring that First Nations are consulted and engaged and participate in these projects. All of that rests with the feet of government. And so what investors are saying is, Canada, you can't get your act together. We're going somewhere else with our dollars. And that's very frustrating. This will cost us opportunity and jobs in the longer term. So for those who are hailing the decision for ideological reasons, they're really missing the point. The point is that we're suffering as a country because the federal and provincial and local levels of government haven't been able to say to investors, here's what it's going to take to get a project approved and built in this country.
Yeah, and we should be clear. The court cases up till now have generally been around Kinder Morgan's handling of the pipeline. 17 for 17, Kinder Morgan was upheld in court. Their process was fine. 30,000 points of contact they had with First Nations peoples along the route. This was a failure of government. This wasn't Kinder Morgan's fault. Kinder Morgan, every piece of Kinder Morgan's process has been applauded by the courts and upheld. This was a failure of the National Energy Board and the Trudeau cabinet, government and the bureaucracy failing this project and failing the Canadian economy. Chris, are we in the ground a year from now? Are we 2 years from now?
Not a year. It's. I think I think it's difficult to say when construction will start in earnest on this project. Effectively, I don't think there's an appeal route open to the federal government. I think it's back to the drawing board with a consultation process that's going to meet the test that the federal court has laid out, which has been dictated by the Supreme Court of Canada. I think that's a longer process. I think this project is stalled for another 2, 3, 4 years.
Oh boy. Well, and that'll take us past the next Alberta election, where Rachel Notley's NDP are currently, I think, 25 points down in the polls, and take us past the next federal election, where Trudeau is in a lead, but within the margin of error over the Conservatives. So we could have two completely different governments in Alberta and Ottawa managing this thing. And one suspects if they don't make a significant progress on this pipeline, it may be an issue that does cause a change in government.
Well, and a lot of the First Nation consultation and meaningful engagement got a lot of press. The reality is you had 33 First Nations sign on to this project. They're all losers.
Yeah.
And
their rights have been violated by this decision.
And so that it's a loss for everyone.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, again, it's a government failure, and governments have got to get their act in order. And to the extent that they can't, we all suffer. We all lose opportunities. So this isn't good for anyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, ICBA has spent the summer in court fighting the proportional representation rigged process, a process that every neutral observer, except for the judge overseeing our case, seems to think is rigged. She came down and said no injunction. She's not going to stall this thing. We're back at the drawing board, waiting for the provincial government to find the time to defend the legislation that they themselves crafted. We're back in court this September, I believe.
Yeah, so a couple of things that we've got a lot of questions coming out of this. We applied for an injunction for a very simple reason. The government of British Columbia basically said they weren't ready. We went into court in July and said the clock is ticking. The referendum's going to be held in November. We should have an expedited hearing on this to ensure that the court hears all the issues, and if they agree and there's a remedy, that there's time to provide that remedy. The government of BC astoundingly said they need more time. Now, think of it. They've got hundreds of lawyers in Victoria. They've been working on a year to get the legislation, the process, the regulations, the rules in place. It's their rules, their process. They're not ready to defend it, which is astounding. And so we would say, listen, if the government's not ready to defend this because it's so complicated,
that's a sign that they haven't done the process right.
So if they need to take a breather and get ready, I think British Columbians need the time as well to consider this more thoroughly. But nonetheless, we applied for an injunction because the government was delaying the hearing of the main case. Getting an injunction, it's a very high bar. You're basically asking the court to make a decision on an interim basis before they can hear the whole case. She said, no, we need to hear the full case before, so she wasn't going to grant an injunction. Fair enough. We're now focusing on getting a date to have the hearing heard. Again, we're hoping the government will move quickly and agree to a date in September or October so we can have the case heard. And the Premier's been very clear. The Premier's clear on the Kinder Morgan case. He said when reasonable people disagree on an issue, we have the courts in Canada and British Columbia where those differences are heard. And so we're asking for the same courtesy that he was asking when he was opposing the Kinder Morgan case, is that to have his case heard in the court of law, and we're asking the same thing. But unfortunately, when it suits them, they're going to go to the courts. When it doesn't suit them, well, they're not ready, they're not prepared. They're going to drag their heels. They're going to drag this process out, so that unfortunately there'll be less time for a court to remedy this. But in a nutshell, Prop Rep is seriously flawed. The question is confusing. And, they'll say, Elections BC said the question is fine. What Elections BC said, the plain language, makes sense. But the reality is there's three choices. If you decide that you want to support proportional representation, there's three choices of three different systems. No one's going to understand that. They won't have time to understand.
Two of them don't exist anywhere in the world.
It's ridiculous. Second, the process has been rushed. In 2005 and 2009, the question was very clear. It was the current system versus one other choice. That's how this question should be organized. In 2005 and 2009, the referendum occurred at the same time as the provincial election, ensuring there's greater engagement, greater discussion, a more robust debate. This time they rushed the process and they're using a mail-in ballot. And finally, they've lowered the threshold of approval from 60% to 50% plus one. The entire process has been rigged and to get the answer they want, which is yes, they want to change the way we elect our government, which would be, we think, the consequences of that. And you can see this playing out all over Europe. We have proportional representation. Fringe parties on the left and the right are being elected, and they're starting to hold countries and governments hostage. We're going to see that kind of thing develop in this province if we go down the side down the path of proportional representation. It will be bad for our economy and bad for our politics.
Yeah, and we were told by veteran court observers when we started this that really your only hope was to stay alive through the BC court system and try to get outside of BC, and that federal courts are far more likely to give an honest view of the provincial government's actions more so than the court system that often depends on the funding from the same guy who we are currently essentially suing in court to stop. That was it for Prop Rep. But certainly we are supporting the official no campaign for all the reasons that you listed. We are also in court fighting the PLAs, Project Labor Agreements. This is the union-only monopoly on the Patello Bridge, the Highway 1 expansion east of Kamloops, and it looks like probably the Arbutus Subway, the Patello or the Surrey Light Rail, and God knows what other projects they want to add to this. We're in court, and we have some unlikely allies with us.
Well, listen, this is a very important initiative that we've undertaken. Effectively, what the government has done is they've cut a deal with the building trades unions. So it's 19 unions affiliated with the building trades. They've left off the table 85% of the construction workforce in this province. They've left off the table the portion of the construction workforce in BC that's represented by other unions that are not affiliated with the building trades. Two of them have joined our lawsuit, CLAC and CWU, and combined they represent about 13 to 15,000 workers in British Columbia. All of those people are being left out of this deal, and
along with our 50,000 or so that ICBA represents.
Yeah, there's roughly 250,000 construction workers in BC. The building trades, by their own numbers, represent about 35,000 of those men and women. Yeah, so it's simple math, and the reality is, if you're going to have an honest discussion about this, let's call a spade, and this is the government went behind closed doors, negotiated a backroom deal with the building trades union. It wasn't open for consultation or discussion with anyone else, and they came up with this mechanism which basically says, if you are a construction worker in British Columbia and you want to work on one of these publicly funded projects, and the two they've listed from the get-go are the Highway 1 expansion and the Patello Bridge replacement, you have to join one of the government-approved unions, one of these selected unions, to work on that project. That's not fair, and it's discriminatory. There is no good reason why workers should be forced to suspend membership.
No good reason. The NDP have 2.3 million good reasons. The amount of money those building trades unions happen to have donated to them over the past 10 years.
Yeah, it's less efficient. It will be more costly, and by the Minister of Transportation's own admission, it will cost taxpayers another $100 million to build the Patello Bridge under this model. Canadian Federation of Independent Business estimates that if you applied this model across the entire $25 billion of capital spending the government plans over the next 3 years, it would add another $4 billion in costs. So not only is it not fair and discriminatory, it's more costly, it's inefficient. And at the end of the day, the outcomes, the stated goals are to increase better outcomes on training, better outcomes on opportunities for a number of different groups in construction. None of that's going to be accomplished. And so we're going to pay more. The outcomes won't be better. And the projects will go over schedule and over budget. And it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's a real mess. We're looking forward to just getting our day in court on this. We expect this to be a long battle, but one that is important that we win because, like you said, 85% of the construction industry is being effectively shut out by this this model that has been dropped by other places all over Canada, including most recently Manitoba, and Ontario is getting rid of theirs. So we're trying to turn back the clock to a construction industry that no longer exists.
Well, and the reality is we're sort of old-fashioned at ICBA. We think that when government tenders a contract, they should go out and issue the RFP and have the marketplace respond.
Yeah.
And those with the best design, the best approach, the best value, the best way to deliver that project for taxpayers, those are the companies that should win the work.
Right.
Not those who have...
Tilt the playing field.
Yeah, you're basically saying, well, no. We're going to give an inside track here to 15% of the construction workforce.
We know better than you what kind of people should be working on this.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's highly offensive.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of backroom deals that, funny enough, when Premier Horgan said, we were sworn to Premier is going to be Premier for all of British Columbia. Well,
all of British Columbia who stroked him a check.
Yeah, it's not right. It's not fair, and that's what we're fighting against.
The NDP have been astounding in their hypocrisy. I mean, you mentioned earlier one example. It's okay for them to go to court, but not for anyone else. Here you have them spending years ripping Christy Clark and Gordon Campbell for deals with friends and insiders, when this is as offensive and pure a sweetheart deal as you're ever going to see. You have David Eby on one hand demanding that BC Liberals waive cabinet confidentiality, on the other hand trying to protect it during PLA debates and other things. It really is amazing that these guys so quickly have become all the things that they claim they hated about the previous government.
Well, David Eby they all talk a good game about democracy and openness and transparency, but how they're managing this government is exactly the opposite. Prop Rep is a great example where there's no openness, no transparency. They rush the process. They're betraying the very democratic principles they say they're trying to protect because they know better. Rather than giving British Columbians a chance to thoroughly consider the options and give them a clear question, a clear choice, current system versus another system, they rush this process, and effectively the way the math will work, 9% of British Columbians may determine that we're going to be electing our MLAs next time.
May determine how, and then an even smaller percentage, 0.00001%, effectively NDP and Green MLAs will determine the actual rules of that system if it passes. It's Banana Republic stuff. It's shocking that they would even try it, but it's even more shocking that the public has not woken up and punished them for it, although I think things are slowly shifting on that. Chris, the other big news, of course, tonight, the NFL season kicks off.
Cowboys, Super Bowl winners in Atlanta.
In 2134. No, it's a big year. Chris, of course, being a Dallas Cowboys fan, I being a Green Bay Packer fan. There's just some honest cheeseheads from Wisconsin, Chris. Some farm kids just trying to play some football and not get overshadowed by the big city. That's the Green Bay Packer way, but very exciting. Obviously, Chris is picking the Cowboys. I presume to win the Super Bowl?
Let's not get too excited. As a Cowboys fan, I think we've gotten used to the fact that they often don't make the playoffs, and it can be frustrating to be a fan. But hopefully they have a good season. It'll be fun. NFL. I love the NFL.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Green Bay, a retooled secondary, a healthy Aaron Rodgers collarbone. All of our literally all the hopes and dreams of Packer Nation rest on the fragile collarbone of number 12. Aaron Charles Rodgers. All right. I think that's it for us. Thank you for bearing with us. We didn't get a chance to record much in August, but we are back. We will be back regularly throughout September. There is some super exciting stuff out there coming in September, some things that ICBA is involved in. We can't wait to roll those out and talk more about it. And it's a sprint now. The fall is here, and we are busy preparing. We didn't even talk about things like cannabis legislation changes, which is having a huge effect on our industry, and we're doing some legwork on that to get ready for that. We didn't talk about NAFTA, steel, trade, That's cars. Right. We didn't talk about who wrote that Donald Trump, anti-Donald Trump op-ed in the New York Times.
I know. Do we have the answer?
No, but do you think it's Mike Pence? Everyone says it's Mike Pence because they use the word lodestar. But that feels to me like a planted word.
It was a planted word. I don't think it was.
If it was a Netflix show, it would have been Trump himself who wrote it. That would be the big reveal at the end of the season, and it would be some sort of Machiavellian plan that he hatched in order to distract from his sagging poll numbers. But we all know that that is not the case. And whoever wrote that, you're going to get a hell of a book deal out of this.
It took 32 years for Deep Throat to be revealed from Watergate, so it could be quite a while.
32 hours have gone by.
Yes.
32 days?
It could
Will
be
we
a
know
while.
within 30 days, you think?
I don't think so.
All right. It sounds like the White House is a real fun place to work these days. All right. From all of us at ICBA, thanks for listening, and we will talk again soon.
Have a good day.